Yep. Oh, cool. Okay, nice. Nice.
Find the Fairway is coming at you live tonight on March 22nd. And the USGA rolling back the golf ball. Is it good for the game? And will it let the Bombers have even more of an advantage over the average tour pro? Scotty Scheffler will defend his WGC Match Play title in Austin the last time at Austin Country Club. We're going to make our picks. And a report from Alan Shipnuck from the Player Pick Collective says maybe LIV Golf is in turmoil right now with ratings at Tucson down to a lowly 0.14. What does that mean? And some budget concerns with the LIV Golf Tour. Joining me this week, Chris Breece, James Nitties. Looks like he is in a hotel room because you are, James. You are covering the tour event, PGA Tour Live, WGC Match Play this week. And I don't want to call you a recurring guest, but I'm glad to have you again.
Thanks for bringing me in here, Chris. We had such a great time last time. I expect to do it again with the topics you've got lined up for us tonight.
We do. And, match play, we're going to get into that in a second. What's it like for you doing this PGA Tour Live stuff? I know you live in Dallas, traveling to Florida, the Jacksonville area, St. Augustine, Florida. You get in there today, right? What's that turnaround like production-wise? And you're starting on a Wednesday, of course, this week.
Yeah, so of course, usually the events start on a Thursday, but typically you come in the day before. We have a production meeting around about 4 p.m., go through the ins and outs of the weeks. Every tournament's different, especially this week. This is going to be fun doing the Dell Match Play. I'm excited for some different style of format. But yeah, we go through everything, what you can say, what you can't say, which actually they give us a fair bit of rope there. We can say pretty much whatever we want within reason. But yeah, as every show, I'm sure you'd be a part of a lot of shows where you just need to run through a smooth sailing kind of a broadcast, and it's really good to get behind the scenes and come here. For me, I'm lucky we have people on site in Austin, Texas this week that'll be walkers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in studio analyst, so I'm here in St. Augustine. But yeah, so it's a little different, but it's definitely fun from being a player and getting to do some broadcasting now.
Dell Match Play coming up here in a little bit. James, we got to start with the rolling back of the golf ball proposed by the USGA and the R&A would be going into effect in January of 2026. What does it mean? Well, on average, reduced drives of 14 to 15 yards, about 10% less of a yardage for a player, whether you're off the tee, around the fairway, call it what you want. And James, a lot of debate about whether this is good for the game of golf. You've got guys like Justin Thomas saying they're really upset about this. But then you have guys saying, you know what, this was long overdue. And the commissioner of the USGA, the president there, said that he had 50-50 guys saying that I am lauding you, thank you for doing this. And then the other 50% saying, how dare you do this to the game of golf? But James, that's what things are going to do and be like. If you are in charge and a leader of a league like this, you have to do something. And I know you like the change.
I love it. Look, those comments from Justin Thomas, they were, I think, premature.
Mm-hmm.
I think now, once he's had some time to sit back and really go over what he said, it's like, I think at one point there, he said it's, like, what are we going to increase the length of a 100-yard dash or something? But it's, you're going to limit the guys that are the fastest runners opposed to, the slower runners. And I'm like, well, my debate back to that would be, would be like making you wear a certain type of shoes. if you were getting too much of an advantage. So in basketball, if you were jumping too high, it'd be limiting the shoes if you were getting the advantage from that. So look, I love it. I don't think it's going to change a lot at all. The longest players are still going to be the longest. It's more of the ball's not going to spin more, so the ball's still going to go very straight. So people that think there's going to be more shot shaping, no, not really. I think the most advantage would come from the players, not only that hit it the longest, because that will always be the advantage, but they're still going to have that advantage. The guys that hit it the highest, being able to, flight longer irons into greens. But I think they needed to go even more with this. But look,
more than 10%.
Not necessarily with the distance of the ball. I would personally like, and I'm an ex-player, now broadcaster, so I suppose you could call me a fan. I just want entertainment. I want more parity. I want the guys, the best in the world, to separate themselves even more. And look, the more limits you put on the game, the tougher you make it, the better the best players will get, the more they will separate themselves. So what technology for me has done has brought that middle of the pack guy more into the picture, being able to throw his hat in the ring, first time winners. Because back in the day, if the ball wasn't changed and technology didn't go in the direction it was going around that 2005, 2006 mark, Tiger would have just absolutely dominated even more than he had. I thought it just brought the rest of competition closer to him. And then we saw Tiger go and use a spinnier golf ball, a softer golf ball throughout the years of all this, involvement of technology. So, look, it's happened in the past. Back in the 80s, the 90s, they had a small golf ball and they went to a bigger ball that went shorter. Jack Nicklaus was very vocal about that, how he wanted actually there to be limits on the game, because he knew that the more that technology helps the player, the more it's going to be the average player. So look, I think they talked about going near the driver. That was too hard. They spent about 2 or 3 years on possibly limiting the sweet spot of the driver. The ball was just the easiest way. Once again, it's the only advantage really here, I think, is going to be the golf courses and course design, because now you're going to get the longest hitters still hitting it maybe 14 to 15 yards, a little shorter, but into certain areas where now they have to think of water carries or bunker carries, description shots they're going to have to hit. But to tie a bow in it, for me, the longest guys are still going to have the advantage, because when it comes down, the further you hit it, the accuracy is kind of not as valuable, because you're still going to have to hit a lot of fairways and then a lot of long irons in, where as if, a guy like Rory is still going to be hitting, a 9-iron in, opposed to one of the shorter hitters on the tour where would be hitting a 6-iron in. So it's, look, I love it. I think it's going to be entertaining. I think it's going to create a buzz in the game. It's going to create more parity, as I said, and more separation at the top of the world.
You give the pros perspective. I'll give you the average fan's perspective. I'd call myself an avid fan, not an average fan. But originally, when this came out, my first thought was, why change something that's not broke? Now, you can argue that it is broke, because they're talking about, if you still want to play courses like St. Andrews, the way they were designed to play, you could say that for half the courses. Shoot, Augusta National, for crying out loud, you could say the same thing. Something needs to be done. So I understand the uproar from that sense. Why change something when the game is so good right now? But then I thought about what we as a society usually do when we have change in front of us. We don't like it. We hate having to do something new when we're very comfortable doing what we're doing. And so I think this is one of those things, if and when it gets proposed and passed in 2026 in January, we're going to forget about it. We're absolutely going to forget that this rule change, this change that the golf ball happened. And just because you're not hitting the best of the best, the Pro V1 of the Pro V1, people are going to completely forget about it, and they're going to move on to something else. And they're going to move on to something else very soon. And they probably already have, James, to be realistic. You had mentioned the guys who hit the ball a long way having an even bigger advantage. And I kind of want to highlight what you were saying with that. An average hole on the PGA Tour, and I used Augusta National just for the sake of the argument, is 455 yards for a par 4. Now, I took Rory McIlroy, his average driving distance of 326, and then I took the average tour player's driving distance of 297. Their second shot into the hole now in 2023, 129 yards for Rory McIlroy and 158 for the average player. Now, you scale that back 10%. Rory's hitting the ball 294. The average player is hitting it 267. And here's where I think your point comes into account. The second shot into the hole, if and when this proposal happens, 161 yards for Rory McIlroy, 188 yards for an average player. You tell everybody why that's a big deal and a big advantage for the Bomber.
Well, look, when the way distance went, especially over the last 3 to 4 years, with guys we saw, Bryson winning the US Open and just taking apart Windfoot to the point where he was happy to be 40 to 50 to 60 yards in front of, the shorter hitters of the event. And even being in the rough, he just thought at the way that the statistics will shake out, he's going to get more advantage because, let's be honest, the disparity of accurate players on the PGA Tour, percentage of fairways hit is not a big margin at all. But the disparity between the longest guys and the guys just below average is a long way, especially when it comes to, how firm the fairways get. So this is going to be huge, especially that graphic there where you got Rory with 129 yards in and then the shorter hitter with 161 yards in. The longest are still going to be the longest. The best are still going to be best, but if not even better.
They're hitting wedges. When the guy hitting 188, if he's already an average player, he's hitting what, 8 iron, depending on the elements, maybe 7, possibly 9.
Exactly, and that for them, accuracy will become more important. And this is what I'd like to think too, that the better ball strikers, let's just take the long guys out of the equation here. The better ball strikers amongst those guys that have 188 yards in are going to separate themselves from that pack, from that section of the PGA Tour. So that, then it just becomes more of an all-around game for me personally, because there is ways to find speed and there's ways to hit it further and use course strategy to possibly negotiate certain weeks. I mean, we've heard Kevin Kisner say there's just some weeks that he can't compete and a top 20 is like winning a tournament for him. But he can also gain advantage at some specific courses that are firm and fast, where being accurate but using the course conditions and the contours of the course can often play into his advantage. Something like this week at the Dell Match Play, where it's still around 7,200 yards, but Kevin Kisner seems to play really well around here. So it's an interesting graphic. I love it. I think people need to relax a little bit. The game's gotten, for me personally, and just like you said, being an amateur golfer yourself, the game's gotten too easy. I hate hearing it when people talk about, well, how can I relate to the guys on TV? I was like, I never go to
that's why you're watching them.
Exactly. I don't go to a flag football game with 40-year-olds playing just because I feel like I might be able to relate to them.
Right.
It's I don't want to watch that on TV. I'm not a fan of the game because it's these superhuman efforts that I cannot do. And once again, it's a little bit of that participation trophy of like, well, woe is me, the game's not going to be as fun. Golf's not meant to be fun. Golf's meant to be hard, and it's rewarding once you do a little bit of practice and you hit a couple good shots. So the amount of times you play with amateurs now on the, just regularly that can hit at 300 yards, the game is just going to be fine. This is where golf's rewarding. So you'll find that a lot of amateurs will want to use this ball. They want to use what the pros are using.
Really, you think?
Just to be able to, yeah. I play with enough guys right now that are using the Pro V1X left dash dot 4, and I'm like, mate, what are you using this ball for?
You're losing a $4 golf ball every hole.
Exactly. So the game is, everyone's still going to love it. We already had once again, there were drivers that kind of, the rebound face got banned 6 or 7 years ago. Everyone forgot about that. Like, pros can't use that face. Amateurs can still use it, but they don't. Everyone still wants the newest tailor-made driver that the pros are using. So I think it's, as you said, we're not going to be once it'll happen. It'll barely be a change. And then the pros that are complaining that it's going to take them ages to be able to get into this ball. Well, pros go from different course conditions. The difference between Torrey Pines and, let's say, TPC Scottsdale is around about 10% in air flight for a driver. So it's, these guys change conditions all the time. They go to different elevations where they have to take 10% off because the ball's flying that much further. So from a pro's perspective, it's not going to be hard to get into. There's still not a lot of spin on the ball. As I said, it's still going to fly straight. You're not going to see guys working the ball crazy and hitting it 40, 50 yards offline, which is what I'd like to see. Just add more spin to the ball. I think that'd solve a lot of things. But I think it's great from a fan and also now a broadcaster. I would love it. As a player, I would have loved this. It's happened throughout, years and years of golf. We've had 3 or 4 times in history where there's been bifurcation and limits on the golf ball and drivers, etc.
Given that the PGA Tour is going to go along with this, because technically they don't have to. I mean, I know they kind of look at the USGA as kind of a mentor, so to speak, right? They don't have to do it, but is it hard to believe them not doing it?
I think they'll do it. I heard a podcast with Billy Horschel today. He said he hasn't heard from anyone, and it's no sources but his own. But that he said that he doesn't think they'll do it. He doesn't think the players will agree to it. So, and then he said, "This is me. Don't take it out of context. I haven't heard anything. I wouldn't be surprised." But then I'm on the same deal. This is my own opinion. I think they'll do it. I think the majors will do it, and then the tour will follow suit. You're not going to want guys to change balls, and then a lot of decisions are made from the R&A and the home of golf, and we saw Cam Smith tearing that place apart. All those guys, Rory making it just look obsolete with every bunker carry out there. So I think that it'll do a lot for being able to play different events at some of the iconic golf courses around the world, and not just in 3 years, but from 7 to 8 to 9 years, and still be able to look at course design where the product you're trying to give to your fan is a fantastic result.
As if Jay Monahan's job was not hard enough right now, if he has to fracture together some players who don't want this to happen. It'll be fascinating in a couple of years. They won't be rolling back the golf ball at Austin Country Club in the future. It's because Austin is no longer in the rotation of the match play. The WGC is gone for good after this. We don't know if Austin Country Club or if the match play will be a thing in the future. We can talk about that in a minute. Here's the logistics of the WGC match play this week. 16 4-man groups. They play a round robin. The winner of each group goes on to a 16-team bracket. And this place in February got destroyed by an ice storm. 1,200 trees got damaged, James. So it's a way different course right now than it was, say, 2 months ago. And everybody loves Cinderella stories in a bracket, right? Well, winners from 2018 to 2021, they were ranked 32nd, 45th, and 48th in the world. So with that said, James, we're going to go NCAA bracket style here in a minute. I want to get your thoughts on Austin Country Club at first, and match play being a part of the PGA Tour rotation in the future, and if you think it should be a part of the rotation in the future.
I definitely do. I'm biased. Match play was a big part of my life growing up in Australia. But I just think it's such a great format, and it brings the passion out in the guys. It brings out different kind of gamesmanship, the way you play the game towards how your opponent's playing. It's not just trying to beat the course and post a score. There's so many different scenarios that can happen. Usually the best player wins, especially this format. It's always, there's no luck involved. You really have to work hard to get out of your pool. And then it's, you versus another player, tennis style. So I love it. I heard that they are still working on keeping this format involved on the PGA Tour for next year and going forward. Obviously, there's going to be, the last World Golf Championship that we're going to see, but and then at this location we're leaving. But it's just such an it's look, everyone loves the Ryder Cup, because not only the passion but the format. It's just so many different things can happen. This, especially in history, you always hear of the greatest players always talking about some of their fond matches were, albeit a match play style of event, and we have a lot of iconic kind of results because of that style.
And I think the golf nerd loves it right now because it's right in the middle of NCAA March Madness. So what we're going to do tonight on Find the Fairway Live, James, is turn this, and it basically used to be a 64 team player bracket. They made the pool change of round robin a couple of years ago. It used to be a 64 man bracket. So let's take it back to the old days. Let's incorporate the NCAA basketball tournament here using 4 number 1 seeds. Rory, Rahm, Scheffler, Cantlay are all one seeds, and you go all the way down to 16. We're each going to give our picks for these 4 iconic things that always happen in the NCAA basketball tournament. Who's your number 1 seed who's going to flop, i.e., Purdue this year in the NCAA basketball tournament? Who's your Cinderella Final Four? A seed 13 to 16. It has to be 13 or over. Think of a Loyola Marymount and Sister Jean at Loyola Chicago, I should say. And then middle seed champion, which seems to happen a lot. Seeds 6 through 12, the Kentuckys and the UConns, who have won this thing as an 8 seed or a 9 seed. So somebody seeded 6 to 12 who could easily be a champion in this thing. And then who usually wins the NCAA tournament is a 2 to a 5 seed. Not necessarily the top dog, the number 1 seed, but a really good player who is on the verge of doing big things and at an elevated event would win a lot of money. I'm going to let you go first. You're the guest. Going down the list here, who's your number 1 seed to flop?
It's such a tough question, this one. I've got to say Rory. I think, you know what, and Rory's coming out of the easiest pool as well, by what I've seen. Apart from Hatton, Hatton is in his pool. I think Hatton's going to go a long way. But Rory, he said it himself. He's just looking forward to getting back to being a professional golfer and not the face of the PGA Tour. He's been drained, mentally stressed, and fatigued. We saw him at the Players' comments about his driver, where he wishes he could go back to his old driver, but he can't. And obviously, that is a rule because a lot of these PGA Tour players, because of the swing speeds, they thin out their faces. Like the more that a driver is hit, the thinner the face becomes, and the thinner the face becomes, the further the rebound effect will happen off that face, in turn making it illegal to use. So he is, look, it's Rory. He still was positive strokes gained at the Players where he missed the cut with his driving, but he still said he's not, he doesn't feel comfortable with that driver. And what you have to do around Austin Country Club is drive it well. There's a lot of trouble lurking. So look, I got McIlroy. It's a hard one. But just on how he's been playing and what's been going on in his life, I think he's going to be the one that's going to flop.
You said it. I mean, nothing more to say about Rory McIlroy. He's my pick as well. More so the fact that I don't see Rahm or Scheffler being a flop out of their bracket. And Patrick Cantlay, I feel like he has a lot to prove right now. Really hasn't done a whole lot in the last 6 to 8 months. I think this is kind of the time for Patrick Cantlay to get going and prove that he's a top 4 player in the world. Let's go to your Cinderella Final Four. Again, this is a seed 13 to 16 who could win the entire thing. So we're looking at guys in the, call it 45 to 64 range.
Okay, this was also a tough one, but hey, it's
That's
Cinderella
the goal.
Story. I had a couple guys. I got a guy that I think is going under the radar in Victor Perez.
Okay.
The Frenchman. He currently leads the race to Dubai. He's number 1 in the rankings over there on the DP World Tour. He's had a win this year. This is why he goes under the radar. Everything's been focused on the PGA Tour. A lot of people not looking at this. He just came over. He's acclimated in America, made the cut last week at Valspar, but he's a fantastic player. It's also a Ryder Cup year for him. Look, on the European Tour rankings for the Ryder Cup, he's 4th on that ranking. And so, he's in the team. But when you put the world rankings together and you put all the guys that have been playing on the PGA Tour that are from Europe, he's not on the team. So I think this is a week would go a long way because it's a Ryder Cup style of play. And I think that he's the steely Frenchman. I think he might be able to get it done. He's going to have to go through Scheffler to get there, which is, I feel like Scheffler's obviously the favorite, but I think it's just a good Cinderella story and someone that no one's expecting to do well.
He has a lot to prove, and he's eyeing September when they go to Rome. That is for sure. I'm going to go with Christian Bezuidenhout. I really think that what he's done the last 2 months, when you think of guys who are Cinderella stories or long shots, so to speak, you always have to look at who's the guy on the leaderboard you don't know a whole lot about. And I feel like Bezuidenhout is exactly that. I mean, the Players' Championship tied for 13th. He shoots 74 on Sunday, completely gets out of the tournament. But look at his first 3 days. The guy was in the thick of it. Tied for 11th at American Express. I think this is a guy who can sneakily, and I believe he's with Tony Finau. And Tony Finau, I have no idea what to expect out of him on a given week. So I'm going to go Bezuidenhout for my Cinderella story. Middle seed champion. Again, this is seed 6 through 12, who could easily win this entire thing.
We might have the same picks here for these next two.
We don't. Our last one's the same.
Okay, cool.
You picked a trendy. You picked someone a lot of people are talking about, and they talked about him a lot at the Players too. And I bet on him.
Yeah, look, I'm exactly Jason Day. I have to go with my Aussie countryman here. But you're the one that made the rules, and he's just the brightest name in this kind of bracket here, the middle seed champ. There's a guy that's won here in 2015. He's in form. He played
it's awesome to see him playing well again, by the way.
Yes, he's in form. He was kind of in last year in the middle of a swing change, working on a way to swing around his injuries so he could compete longer. Also get more consistent under pressure with his driving. So he's shallowed out his swing a little bit more. And he's got that eye of the tiger back. He looks locked in this year where he's just focused on winning. It's not, can I compete? Can I work this shot under pressure? Now it's just like, all right, I'm one of the best putters that's on tour, if not has ever lived. His short game's unbelievable. The way he uses spin to his advantage with his shorter clubs, I've said, is some of the most impressive stuff I've ever seen. Just he has so much control over the ball. He's injury-free, looks sharp, and as I said, he's in a little bit of form, has won here. He's just trending in the direction of really making a flash this week.
And you could probably say between that, what you just mentioned, and his putting was the reason why he kind of fell off the charts for a handful of years. Now he's back. We love to see it. I'm going to go Corey Connors. Everyone knows he made the Final Four, so to speak. Last year, he finished third. I think he's one of those guys who really hasn't played too great this year, but really loves this golf course. I think you're looking for guys who love this course and know how to play it. Corey Connors would be that guy for me. Last one here, we do have the same guy. A so-called favorite, 2 to 5 seed who could easily win this thing, and nobody would be surprised at all.
All right, well, it's Tyrrell Hatton, and of course, and everyone's picking Hatton. I mean, it's
is everybody picking him?
Well, me and you are. That's 100%.
We are everybody. You're right, 100% on this show.
Look, another guy that's in fantastic form. We saw what he did at the Players to finish second. Difficult course, have to hit all the shots. Was right there at the Arnold Palmer Invitational. Again, another difficult course, iron play. I think another Ryder Cup year, Hatton's going to be right there for the Europeans. I think this is a way of him kind of pushing himself into the situation of being one of the best in the world when it comes to the rivalry of the US versus
He
Europe.
has a lot to prove in the Ryder Cup too. You could easily make that argument.
100%. And he's just built for Ryder Cup. He's got the personality where you think he's about to blow his fuse.
He's the new Ian Poulter.
Yeah, and I mean, it'd be like saying a Djokovic in tennis, where he's just body language always gives you the impression that he's down and out, but he never gives up and he's never out. It's almost like he uses it to his advantage. It's a bit of a gamesmanship. Look, he's He putts awesome, and he's driving it fantastic this season. He's improved his accuracy. Picked up 70 positions in strokes gained accuracy. He was 3-0 coming out of the pool, the first pool here, the round to get to the round of 16 last year. So he plays well around here. He loves the style of play, and I think just that wily attitude that he has, I think it's going to mess with a couple guys' minds.
Makes you wonder if his mind, if it's right, and we don't know if it ever has been or if it ever will be, if it's right, if Terrell Hatton's the kind of guy who could just go on a tear and become a top 7, top 5 player, if he has the right mental space, because you see it so many times. He's right there, James. And when he is, there's nothing about this guy's game that has a flaw.
Well, you can only go off what he's said himself. He's like, yeah, I get a little bit crazy here, and I might throw a club or say something I shouldn't, but
Yeah.
I always just get on with it with my next shot, and I'm very good at doing that, and my bounce back stats will back that up. So, hey, if he said it, and once again, he's improving across the board this year. So I think especially with what he did at the Players, just to prove that he can come back like that on a Sunday and nearly win the tournament. It's such a difficult course. I think he's got an opportunity of being that guy this week.
And Tyrrell Hatton was probably this stereotypical player who would have gone to LIV Golf last year. He hasn't done it. We have no idea if he will in the future. The report out from Alan Shipnuck at Fire Pit Collective, James, basically it doesn't paint LIV as a tour in despair, but it has glowing issues. Suddenly on a budget, these players now all of a sudden aren't getting their individual money. It's going back to the team. The team has to pay for its own travel. The Saudis, whoever's in charge there, were appalled at the videos that came out of those first-class jets that basically they called a frat party. And all these first-class amenities, James, have suddenly disappeared. Everything that you saw from last year, 75 to 85% of it is now gone. Now, there's other issues that LIV faces, i.e. the main one, getting top players. But when Mito Pereira is your biggest sign of the offseason, that's your first issue. I want to get your thought on the fact that maybe budget does become a thing for this tour now. And James, if that's the case, what do they have going for them?
It's almost a can of worms. It's starting to open up now, Chris. Look, I thought it was one of the biggest parties on earth last year, and I thought everything was sunshine and roses. And to know that those kind of party jets were actually not sanctioned, and how deep does it go? Are the caddies getting treated like they did? We saw how the caddies weren't paying for expenses.
Allegedly, they're not being treated that way anymore.
And then the lavish parties that they have before the events start are meant to, you can see them trying to cover them up with sponsorship, either some tequila brand so they're obviously not paying for those because they're trying to subsidize it some way. Look, my impression was that there was an endless flow of money and they could.
I think everybody thought that.
And so now it seems like that LIV or whoever, LIV really wants some return on its investment. And the viewership. I watch the highlights. I don't get the CW. I don't have like regular cable. I don't know where it is. I don't have the app. I don't pay for it. But I definitely wanted. So I definitely wanted to see how some of my friends were going. But the event looked great. It looked like it came down to a thrilling finish. But I think you're going to get a lot of the regular viewer just watching the highlights or watching the social media updates. So I don't think it's something you sit down and watch. It doesn't have the parity as the PGA Tour, and I'm not here nor there for anything. I want to see the best players play well, but when you don't have Cam Smith, Dustin Johnson, Brooks Koepka, Bryson DeChambeau dominating the top of the leaderboard, you're not going to attract viewership. And it's you don't have a cut. You don't have Denny Lee. I love him, a buddy of mine. Not a good buddy, but I know him, and fantastic to see him win. But that's not going to help the bottom line of what LIV are trying to achieve. So we're starting to see a lot of different things come out, and It's interesting, to know that that it's not just it's a little rocky. So do they get bored? Do they? I don't know. It's a very interesting position that they're in right now, especially when the PGA Tour is doing so well.
Obvious way to look at this to me has always been one way. The only way they can succeed is if they get top 15 players in the world, top 10 players in the world. And if they are not going to be paying $200 million like they did to Phil, maybe even $150 million, no one's going to go. I mean, we all know that the American thoroughbreds aren't going to go. I mean, you're not going to get Rahm. You're not going to get Zalatoris. Zalatoris allegedly turned down 130 million. If they can't pay them 200 million anymore, they're not going to go. And on its face, Liv would be dead in the water, so to speak, in terms of competing with the PGA Tour.
Well, you're 100% right, and I think the movement we saw last year was so great, especially with Cam Smith going, just after winning the Open Championship. I felt they thought there was going to be this mass exodus. The Live, I presume, thought this, and they're close with the team aspect. It's still a little bit kind of janky, but there's something there, and you see the players, like you had Mickelson with the walk and talk down the fairway, and in the final round, and talking about how he was pumped for the team, and the Kevin Na about sitting at the side of the green where he was kind of really showing emotion. There's spurts of something there for Liv, but the problem is they just don't have the draw. They don't have the casual fan that they've dragged from the PGA Tour to come to Live and really put it on a pedestal yet. And like all startups, it's going to take a little bit of time. But if they start losing interest and expecting a return, it could look. I don't know what they would do, especially when you're hearing some of the players are kind of wishing they didn't go. There's some rumblings, and I don't know who that's coming from, and that's not a credible source. But there is a lot of players that are trying to work out with their agents if there's a way for them to get back to the PGA Tour.
Just so everybody knows, James had his phone propped up on some protein powder, and I'm sure it fell down. So you're all manual here with your hands. But before I let you go, James, we're going to play a fun game based on LIV Golf. Which of these four things do you think will happen first? LIV Golf folds completely. They're done. Greg Norman out as the CEO. There were already rumblings about that in the offseason. It didn't happen. A player, I have Brooks Koepka on here because he's the one everyone's talking about, wants back at the PGA Tour, wants to leave LIV and go back to the PGA Tour. Or Dustin Johnson retires. Phil Mickelson was too easy to have him retire because of his age. Dustin Johnson retires. And I have DJ on there because we all know he's been very verbal about wanting to play less. How much does he actually care? He's already won everything he wants to win. Of these four options, which one happens first with the drama of LIV Golf?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm going to go with Norman out as CEO. I see that happening more in the next year and a year and a half. They said that LIV's going to make it 3 years. I think then LIV folds completely. That I don't know about that one. They're very. It's got to be Norman. I think Norman will be out. Maybe even a silent partner, silent owner, silent equity. But I don't see Dustin Johnson retiring anytime soon. I reckon he can just play the majors for the next 5-6 years and then take the rest of the season off. But and then you said Brooks. He's the one. He's the link. But
can you imagine? Can you imagine if a player verbally went out there and said, I want to go back to the PGA Tour? I mean, that would just be the biggest PR nightmare you could imagine for LIV.
Oh, I know. And I don't know if that was going to happen, there'd be some talks behind closed doors, because I don't know how the tour would allow that to happen, especially when they've received so much money. And I don't think they're going to pay it all back.
The hand basically said no right now.
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's definitely helping um, the entertainment value of this kind of live v PGA Tour polarizing battle that we have, and the change that we've had in the golf kind of landscape over the last 12 months.
Is James Nitties. Everyone go watch him on ESPN Plus this weekend, starting tomorrow on Wednesday through Sunday at the WGC Dell Match Play Championship on PGA Tour Live there. James, thanks so much on Find the Fairway Live.
Mate, thanks again, Chris. It's a pleasure as always. I love the curveballs you throw me. It's always fun to pick your brain and be able to talk golf on
I'll be back with you again to pick some more brains.
here. Can't wait.
See ya.